Welcome to the Healthcare Technology Panel. Healthcare, one of the oldest industry, but most difficult to change anything. And with the availability of new technologies, including wearable devices and the information systems, the possibility of creating something new and exciting that disrupt the industry has become greater than ever. And today, we're really honored to have an extraordinary panel of speakers together with us to share their insights. Without further delay, I'm going to turn to our moderators and our panelists will introduce themselves a little bit afterwards.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for coming. Let's see. Let's just get a feel for the audience, and we're going to try and make this a very interactive session for healthcare and the transformation of healthcare and technology's effects on that, both here in the U.S. and globally and in China. And I think we've got a very diverse panel that can talk to different aspects of that. So lob in your controversial questions, and hopefully we'll have some different perspectives that really can span biotech and diagnostics and digital health and early stage ventures. But let's get a feel for the audience and who is in healthcare right now, who is professionally in healthcare. Okay, wow. Who is interested in entrepreneurship in healthcare and starting new ventures? Okay, all right. Who is interested in China healthcare? Okay.
Those are easy questions.
Big surprise. Okay. So let's see. My experience is just enough to be dangerous in probably each of those. I started out. I'm a biomedical engineer, and then got an MBA. But I did my first biotech out of MIT, and it's now treating patients. But we founded that back in 2002 with Xu Guangzhang and a bunch of fantastic biomaterials and regenerative medicine experts. And then I've gone kind of sequentially through doing medical devices and surgical tools and a genomics software company, and now more and more digital healthcare, just because I think that's where both the exciting opportunities are to really touch a lot of patients and change a lot of patients' lives, but also that's where the capital is. And so, and I personally believe that while a unique molecule that can kind of hit cancer is important, we've got a lot of great molecules, and the incremental benefit of one more molecule, for the $1 billion it takes to get that to market is really tough compared to what we can do for much less money and much higher impact in digital healthcare. And so, and actually the capital bears that out. So just in the last year alone in the U.S., $3 billion went into digital healthcare, if you can kind of lump all of that together. And it's across a range of things, but everything from software to sensors to wearables. And a lot of that, in fact, the majority of that is being invested by companies that are new to healthcare, right? It's Google Ventures putting in $120 million into a cancer electronic medical record called Flatiron. It's those type of things, non-traditional healthcare investors that are investing in new business models in healthcare, and that's exactly what I teach at MIT, and we can talk to today. So let's why don't we go down the line and have a few minutes for each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and then I'll inject a few questions. But feel free to interrupt us and raise a hand, and I'll call you out, and we can have it very interactive. Okay, Jason, take it away.
Excuse me. So my name is Jason Hardebeck, and I know even less, so I'm maybe not as dangerous as Ed, but my current role, I'm a partner with DreamIt Ventures. We do an early stage fund, and we do technology accelerators as well. I run the Baltimore office, and we have a healthcare accelerator. We partner with Strategics, Johns Hopkins University Medical Center, University of Maryland, Baltimore. So we try to include both payers, providers and stakeholders in healthcare. And our startup companies actually end up with shareholders that are in healthcare. And the real goal of Dream It Health is to connect entrepreneurs with the market, to find that traction. I mean, the challenge in healthcare for an entrepreneur is oftentimes navigating the complexity and finding traction before you run out of money and run out of resources. Tremendously challenging environment. It's also a huge space. I mean, it is, as Ed pointed out, amazing amount of investment, but it's a $3 trillion market in the U.S. So there's an amazing amount of opportunity for innovation. My background originated not healthcare. I'm a mechanical engineering undergrad, and I was a nuclear engineer in the Navy. Ended up as an entrepreneur and started a software company about 15 years ago that I sold to Facebook a couple years back, and have always been fascinated with healthcare for a couple reasons. One is, as I said earlier, it's a huge opportunity for investment. But the other is it's very rewarding to work in an industry where the work that you do has a direct impact on the quality of life and on so many different people and things. And I think that's a for an entrepreneur, if you're going to focus on doing something, do something that makes life better for humanity. And so happy to be here and look forward to the questions.
Hi, good morning. I'm Stan Telson. I'm also really glad to be here. Thank you for Zen, the introductions, and Serena for setting up the panel. So I with a company called Care Innovations. Care Innovations is a startup company that's 50% owned by Intel and 50% owned by GE. And we combined the traditional digital health monitoring platforms from Intel with some pretty novel passive monitoring, home-based monitoring technology from GE. We're in the business of remote care and remote care monitoring. So traditional products, many of you are probably familiar with, if you have a disease like congestive heart failure, if you have weight gain, that's predictive of pending emergency room visit if not addressed. So we have products that can be deployed to monitor folks at home like that. But we're because of the combination of the companies and the technologies, we're moving very much more into smart sensing. So not traditional sensing, but what we call smart sensing, which is doing things in a somewhat more creative way. And then as are many organizations in healthcare now, big data and analytics. And in fact, we see this trend of getting more insight. Some of the insights well known, well understood in the community, like the weight gain. But some of the insight we frankly hope to discover as we do our work. My background is very technical. I actually started as an engineer a while ago, but I've been in the medical device and healthcare space for over 20 years. I've done healthcare information systems and regulated medical devices. I have an electrical engineering background, but I've done a bunch of software and systems, and even a little bit of mechanical activity. So pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So I'm Teresa Kavanaugh. I'm a partner in the international law firm Goodwin Procter in the Life Sciences Group. Our Life Sciences Group kind of focuses on the whole spectrum of how a company goes from early stage to potential partnering. IPO, we focus on deal work, capital markets. My personal focus is on IP. I've done that for about 20 years. And seeing, hundreds of companies go from early stage to success, and sometimes not success, to bankruptcy. Frankly, that's the way life sciences companies go. Sometimes. My background is I'm a lawyer, so watch out. But I also have my PhD from MIT in chemistry, so I am truly devoted to life sciences.
My name is Shen Luan. 5 years ago, we started up a biotech company here in Boston. An old name called Cytotech Labs, but later on we changed our name to Berg. We have actually 3 divisions: Berg Diagnostic, Berg Pharmaceutical, Berg Pharma, and Berg Biosystem. I am particularly involved very early stage of the company, so I was one of the co-founders. So I resonate what Jason said. Certainly, working in healthcare is very rewarding. You could see your hard work help patients. That, leaving the office at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's worth it when that happens, when you see the kids getting better, taking the therapeutics or the test you come up with help to understand what's going on in the molecular level. That's keep me going day after day. So my background is I graduate with a chemistry degree from China and came to the state, learned chemistry, still analytical chemistry, learned how to build a mass spectrometer actually in the state. And then after I graduated, I worked for a couple of multinational companies. Thermo Fisher Scientific is one of them. The other one is Waters, our local company here. It's in the medical device industry, but we make certainly not mobile devices. We need a forklift most of the time to get the equipment in the lab. So that's my experience. I'm looking forward to sharing my experience with you.
Fantastic. So let's, I think we have the benefit of having folks that are familiar with the Boston area, but also are located in other geographies and certainly have traveled back and forth to China, like Shen. I think, we have a fantastic, maybe the best area. I would say the best area in the world for healthcare innovation here in Boston, just because we have all the pieces. You have the basic research, you have the startup companies, you have the entrepreneurs, and maybe the most important thing is you have enough capital to fund both early stage as well as growth stage companies, right? And very hard outside of Silicon Valley to create the next Silicon Valley. Everyone else wants to do it. And now you have a lot of capital in China looking for innovation too. And certainly you can have some of those elements down in other cities around a big academic medical center and an engineering school. But here in Boston, we just have that amplified. Let me throw it out and what in your experiences have been the most important aspects of getting companies off the ground, whether they're in biotech or diagnostics? Anyone want to jump in?
I'll take a stab at that, and I would like to argue that Baltimore is a better place to launch a health tech startup, but I completely agree with Zen that the challenge for startups in general and healthcare, I think in particular, especially in the bio side, is capital, and typical technology investors are rather impatient and like to see a path to a return, and oftentimes that's very challenging, for more traditional, pharma and bio investments. But I think that the capital piece is a challenge everywhere. I think that the key, at least that we've seen, is to be able to partner and collaborate with traditional or incumbents in healthcare as early as possible to find that product market fit. There's a lot of great things you can do with technology. It doesn't mean anyone's going to use it or pay for it, and so the earlier you can find those opportunities, the better off you'll be. And as I said earlier, it's a huge market, and typically we counsel entrepreneurs and startups to focus in, be a big fish in a small pond. With healthcare, excuse me, you can actually do that and still be a billion-dollar company. So it's a tremendous amount of opportunity to focus, but you need to find that fit. You need to find the application, whether it's in the US or China or elsewhere. To me, that's the real key here, is to partner or collaborate at an early stage as possible.
Shen, any insights on doing that with China, in China?
Okay. I mean, I just want to continue on Jason's. I think Massachusetts is still, in my opinion, the best place for biotech. I mean, I have data to support that. And
Okay.
even compared to California, these states generate per dollar invested here, generate more GDP than California. So there was a data that generated by the state, one of the state agencies shows. We're close, but we're better, definitely. So I think I'm the least qualified to talk about money because my first startup, Berg, and I don't have to worry about money. We have a billionaire investor. We're very fortunate to have him. So we're just talking with some of the panel members here. You know, I think it's good and bad. But anyway, the money right now, what I see is coming from China to the States, because as a country, China does now invest more money into R&D. I think there's some Nature review articles talk about biomedical R&D expanding in China. I think they're going gunbuster at about 30% average annual growth rate on money they put it in. This is combining both government and private sector. Money, they spend a lot of money in China, but as you all know, innovation, especially biomedical innovation, is not overnight. And I still think a lot of the companies are coming to US or Europe to look for opportunities where they could invest the money and to license the technology back to China. I think there's a huge market for that. So, plus, you all know the environmental pollution in China. There's a high demand of, cancer therapeutics, for example. I know Dr. Song sits right there, is an expert in this area. So there's a huge market for that. So I agree with Jason. You have to start with the market, to really understand what your technology can help the market you like to serve. And I think the money will come. If you really have a killer technology, you're just looking for, with the help of the lawyer, obviously, properly protected, and then I think the money will come to you. Whether it's from China or whether it's from US, you will find some money to support your project.
Shen, what you said, I just don't want to make sure is not lost on everybody, because you said something hidden in that, close to that last statement, which is you got to look for the market, right? And I think there's often a debate, do you start with a technology and then find a market, or do you start with a market and then find the technologies to kind of fit that need? And what we find is that the survival rate of companies that really start with the market need is much greater than if you start with a technology and boil the ocean. And it's a very frustrating path, and I've been on that path myself, where you're going down a path and saying, will it work in this disease area, will it work in this area, and you're finding out all the problems and all the different technology substitutes, as opposed to starting with the market need. And so really that's a fundamental tenet of design thinking. How do we start with the need, start with the customer, and that insight from Shen, it can be applied to any market and any disease state that you look at.
So just to kind of circle on what we've already talked about, well, first I have to say, I love the whole world, right? We have offices in Washington and Silicon Valley and in Hong Kong and in London and in Boston, so I'm happy. But I think too, kind of the Boston idea and that point, just to touch on that again, and kind of tying into the kind of focus, what is the market? I think the most successful companies we see that come in early and look fundable, if you will, right, that are, from our perspective, Laura's perspective, are ones that have reached out and continue to reach out throughout the life cycle of the company to their peers, to understanding what's going on in their life sciences community, both kind of competitors, but also maybe people companies who are kind of tracking it in a similar fashion of whatever product they're developing. And where you get that is places like Boston, because there are so many of those other companies. So it does feed on itself, but it is very useful. And that kind of feeds to kind of honing in this strategy, company strategy. I think that seeing others and talking with other people kind of helps focus that strategy. So where if you're based, and I actually just was in Chicago the other day with a client, it's kind of a little bit harder for them because they have to make an extra effort, I think, to kind of reach out to those connections. They've done a success of it, but that means traveling, perhaps more for them and more for me. And I think that, it is kind of, there is a synergy in Cambridge, Boston, because it is very easy to get around. And frankly, I think to the Boston Silicon Valley piece, I think because it is a little bit easier, although we may not think that if you live here in the winter, to get around here, you can walk from this place here, we could probably walk to 100 life science companies, right? And there is that kind of synergy, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the importance of the community and the ecosystem. And the Kauffman Foundation right now, which is the Foundation for Entrepreneurship, is doing a study of the Boston ecosystem because they see, by the metrics that they see, the early stage companies have a much higher degree of survivability through the ups and downs of a startup. And that startup resilience is directly attributable to the ecosystem that is, as much your peer CEOs and, leaders and being able to switch among different startups, as much as that, maybe more than the capital, but they're trying to figure that out in the study right now.
That's survivability by geographic region?
They're just looking at the Boston region and diving into that deeply because the survivability in Boston is much higher than in other geographies.
Yeah. There's a very good report by MassBio. If you look at it, just Google their website. There's a PDF file that tells you how many startups in 2013, how many startups in 2014. And 2014 is a record year for IPO.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of work by Michael Porter from Harvard on the sort of localization of particular kinds of industries. And so, for example, I spent a bunch of time in Pennsylvania, and there was an amazing industry for knitting in the central part of Pennsylvania, in fact, Reading, Pennsylvania, which ultimately spun out a company called Arrow, which is now owned by a company called Teleflex. And you wonder, what was the deal where there was the technology to make pointy, sharp things, and knitting needles and ultimately, infusion needles came out of the same hands and heads. So a very similar kind of thing, in the Boston area. In fact, the other nice thing, which I want to come back to one of Zen's points, is that the market's here too. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the technology, it's the fact that when you step out the door, you actually are probably as likely to encounter an engineer as you are a physician or some other clinical person. If you haven't checked out, I was at the Hacking Medicine conference a few months ago, one of them, and what an amazing interplay of both the people with the need and the people with the technology. So one of my favorite things is to just kind of keep in mind that the what and the why really ought to drive the how and the when. And if you start with the how, it's a little bit like that old joke of, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. And it just doesn't work that way. You really need to pick the right tool, define the need first.
Yeah, and that survivability also implies that, if you've started with the market and there's a real need, you can get funded, you can bring a team together to focus on a particular technology you believe is the right solution, you can completely fail. And you can still go raise another set of money and bring a different technology in, after you're learning, because you still have that market need that's unfulfilled and that you know even more about.
And you can do it really quickly, rather than, take years to end up failing. It's much easier to fail faster and then recycle.
Yeah.
To that point, I think from our side, we see companies most fundable, kind of just to fine point it, and thinking mostly in the therapeutic space, but maybe there's analogies to kind of the digital space, if you will, where they have an immediate in life sciences terms can mean 10 years, but plan for a market and a particular drug, but they also have kind of a platform so that if that particular drug or therapeutic fails, and that's the life sciences thing that happens, it sometimes just fails in the clinic or what have you, they do have this platform that can rely on, that they can again reach to their connections and potentially fund that or push that forward too. And that looks very attractive even at the very early stages. What we're seeing, because they have that kind of pivot point, that flexibility, there's the kind of understanding of the market that's brought to bear on the whole process.
Yep, great point. So let's see, let's take a couple of questions from the crowd. Do we have any burning questions? I would also point out that in this crowd, I know a few of you, and you're just as qualified to be up here. So
I'm happy to sit down.
yeah, exactly. Yes.
You like the microphone?
Sure, just so that the video can capture it.
I'm glad to represent the market. I'm a Sloan Fellow here, but I'm a physician by training. And I'm also glad to report that I'm from Baltimore. So this is it's a good combination. Coming from the market side, one of the problems that I see is that there is, like any beginning of any field, there is a great deal of fragmentation. And one of the particular areas that I'm very concerned about is, for example, data. When we have great devices, we do sensors, we can do all this course 2, 4, 6 applications very well. However, how does that translate for the clinician and the other side, and also for the patient, is very challenging, in particular because we don't have integration with electronic medical records, and this is the biggest deal that I see. We can develop new devices, we can do all these beautiful things, but how does that translate, especially when we talk about prevention, and one of you talk about weight, but also how does that translate in real time, real life, on how we can make decisions for those patients? That's very challenging with the electronic medical record the way we see it now.
Yeah, there are two really bad problems that frankly defy good solutions. One of them, and by the way, I'm sure there are more than two, but I'll highlight the two that I've faced for 20 years. One of them is just the concept of date and time, right? Because you don't want to put anything in the record unless you're sure it's properly time-stamped. And I think we're close. I think you can just about integrate a GPS chip. There's a cost issue and a power issue, but you can certainly do that and get very accurate date and time, and by the way, location as well. So I'm personally expecting, and I'm not telegraphing anything, we're not working on this, but I'm expecting devices that will have that capability, or will get that from an associated smartphone is the other way to do it. And the other problem is, whose data is that? I spent a bunch of time in the glucose meter business, two of the 4 largest companies I always had a software for. And the challenge is that you can pick up that meter and do a test, and there's absolutely, besides time, there's also no sense of whose blood that was, whose data that was. And it's kind of risky again, because you certainly don't want to mix the data. You might misdose someone if you made a bad treatment decision. So that one's a little harder. I wish people came with little embedded RFID chips. That one doesn't have a great solution. A fingerprint reader maybe. I mean, there's a lot of interesting opportunities. So good issue without really good solutions yet.
I think it's a very frustrating area because it's such a fragmented set of vendors amid a fragmented set of providers, and there are lots of problems that crop up from there, both from data integrity, but also just single sign-on from the doctor's perspective. Oftentimes they're having to sign on to 11 different systems with 11 different passwords, and none of it works together. And what falls through that is the doctor's time and continuity of care and continuity of data for the patients. I don't know how to solve that. And as an entrepreneur and certainly as an investor, I am scared of that. And I would never go near that in trying to tackle that giant problem. I think that we're going to, in the next 10 years, converge a lot. Unfortunately, the stimulus package for electronic health records actually lengthened the time to consolidation because it funded all of these, more than 200 EHR vendors for even longer, and we were hoping some of them would die off so that there would be consolidation. So what I advise startups when they're looking at some of the data issues is, first of all, try to avoid integrating into EHRs if at all possible, because otherwise you'll have to integrate and do these one-offs for many different first customers, and you won't get any kind of scale. Or just choose one, like Epic or Cerner, one of the big ones. Athena Health has 57,000 doctors' practices, so they are solving the fragmentation issue themselves, and that's a Boston area company. That's a $5 billion awesome company.
There are some startups, though, that are specializing in the business of doing those integrations. So, if you can work with a third party, that's another approach that's possible. And I should add, it's just obvious that if I don't think it ever worked in the U.S., but if a government like the Chinese government said, we're only going to pay for things that integrate correctly, that would go a long way toward resolving the problem in that region, certainly.
Yep.
So I just want to address her question on the mobile and monitoring at the same time. Of course, I told you I used to make a machine that are weighed in tons. But I think I've read something in the Wall Street Journal the other day. Google X team is working on this magnetic nanoparticle that they will let you take it, and then they use some kind of magnetic sensing device and to monitor in the real time. So I'm a technology guy. I know this is at least 5 years away, but that would be, addressing some of your type of questions. I think the technology today is probably not there yet. But there is a lot of regulatory questions too. You could talk about it. The other thing is, I think it's been mentioned about Flatiron Health, which is a very interesting company. I think probably Dr. Song will know that company, Flatiron Health. They use cancer. They come up as a platform for cancer care providers. I think they try to address some of the questions about EHR. And there's a practice management IT packages too, that just add a lot of twists to it, because when you're dealing with data from all different places, and they have some numbers shows 80% of the cancer center doctor or professionals spend their time pulling the data. Only 20% using it to analyze the patient's data and try to come up with treatment. It should be the other way.
Yeah. And I'd also add that we've got 3 of our best and brightest from MIT into that Google X team. So we've got a lot of Boston brain power over in Silicon Valley at Google X. Let's see, Wenji.
Hi, I just want to try to bring this discussion back to healthcare innovation in China, just because we have a great audience from China today, and as you know, China is very different from U.S. In terms of regulation, the policies there. So there's a lot of hurdles in terms of doing business over there, especially in the healthcare area where it's heavily regulated. I'm not sure, like, panelists, do you guys have any experience in that area? Like, what's your experience in terms of doing like healthcare business in China? I think maybe Zan, you would have a lot to say about that. And also, we talked about EHR. I think every event I go, there's always a question about EHR. And I don't know, like in China, I think there's like a trend of implementing EHR, especially in the large hospitals. So I guess for China, I think it's very different. It gets back to the question, you know, the difference in the regulation, the policy. It somehow makes it a little bit easier. It seems like it's a little easier to implement EHR in some of those large Chinese hospitals. What do you see like in the future in terms of innovation of like connecting all those existing EHRs in China? Is there like space for like all of those Chinese students to get back to China to work with those EHRs? And then also like what are the policy or regulation hurdles there?
Great questions. Great questions. I can jump in on a little of that. I mean, I think the China's healthcare system is, by many of the measures, the most corrupt industry in China. And I think we're lucky that we can talk openly about it here. And it's not just the Hongbao, but it's kickbacks, and it's all the stuff that's even made it to the U.S. papers for pharmaceutical kickbacks and bad dealings there. And a lot of that is because China has just strategically underinvested in healthcare in China. And so when you look at the costs in the big public hospitals, 2/3 of those are paid for by the multinational branded drugs. And so it's those drug profits, those pharmaceutical profits by the hospitals that is subsidizing the rest of healthcare in China. And so they can't turn that off immediately. And so they have to transition away from that. And they're transitioning to lower profit drugs, but oftentimes the doctors then make up for that in volume, and they prescribe more, both because the patients want something to be done, and they're paying out of pocket. So it's a very complex set of things, and we could have a whole panel just on that. But I think it opens up the opportunity, and the reason I went there was to try to change some of that and bring really trust. And go right to the ones who we care about. I frankly don't care about the doctors in China. I want to help the doctors in China, but many of them are trapped in their current system. But who we really care about, I think universally, are the patients. And the patients in China pay out of pocket. And the extreme example is cancer therapy, chemotherapy. They're paying $80,000, $150,000 for treatments that are often they're not going to benefit from. And so and they're being overprescribed those treatments, not because the doctors think they'll benefit from them even sometimes, but it's because the doctors get 30% of what they prescribe. So of course they've got a really bad incentive there. And so how do you bridge that trust? Well, you can bridge it with telemedicine, you can bridge it with trusted diagnostics, sensors that are on their phones, information that are on the consumer's phones, and help them navigate the system that is, without that information, just unnavigable, or they have to have blind trust in the hospital and the Chinese doctor. So I think there's lots of opportunity there. The big technology companies also believe there's opportunity. So Alibaba just bought out or Jack Ma's Yongfeng Capital and Alibaba together paid $171 million to buy out a Hong Kong listed company to form the basis of their healthcare analytics platform. Tencent invested $70 million in DXY.com, which is the biggest doctor network in China. So there are lots of funds going into that. But I think you can actually have a big effect even from Boston in China. I mean, Boston is the most influential place outside of China for the Ministry of Health, not just because the last Minister of Health was a graduate of the School of Public Health, but because we've got lots of doctors that have done field work in China since the 70s and are trusted by the premier, not just the Ministry of Health. Shen, you have other stuff to add?
Yeah, I was just to continue on the, I think, if you talk about therapeutics or diagnostic, I think innovation is here for sure. But it comes to healthcare IT. So Zhen mentioned about Ding Xiangyuan. I think most of you know that platform for doctors. And the Tencent also recently had lead an investment of over $100 million on a website called Huahao. I think some of you know that. If you look at that company, I think all of you can do it. But how could that company was able to get 100 million investment from Tencent? Because they are addressing the needs or the pain point in the Chinese healthcare. So if you're in China, you go to doctors. My mom was sick this summer. I was in Beijing for 36 days, and I was in the hospital. And my family, I think you're getting more than the most average Chinese get. But still, I experienced the difficulty, waiting in line to get a registration number, right? And then when you just pay the bills, you're gonna run upstairs, downstairs, and otherwise you won't get the medicine. All right, you do a test, you have to pay first. So all that tour, Guahao try to address it. And that's a type of startup you guys all could think about it. I think it's doable, and the internet companies have been very successful. The BAT, you're all familiar with them. They're very successful, doing other things, doing other industries, but healthcare is no difference. There's a lot of the needs can be addressed by a very simple, low-tech solution.
But in that, the hardest part is how do you stay unique? Not how are you unique to begin with, but how do you stay unique? With software, you're not going to get strong patent protection like a molecule or like a material, and you're going to get copied. And everyone knows all the examples of American companies or returnees getting their butts kicked in China with lots of copying. And so, I think it comes down to network effects and brand and, trust in that brand. You don't start off with a brand in startups, so which brands are you going to align with? And how are you going to get distribution? Is it through Tencent? Is it through Alibaba? Is it through Alipay? I think those are the entrepreneurial challenges, but you get creative when you've taken investor money and then you're having to figure out the solution.
Maybe I can jump in this topic.
Sure.
Because I've been working in the healthcare industry for like almost 20 years. And actually, I got an MD in China. And I've been working in China for 5 years in one of the top hospitals in China, Zhongshan医院. That's the top, the second best hospital in China as a surgeon. So I actually understand the issue you bring up. That's really a big problem in the hospital or healthcare system administration. Actually, right now, things change, I think. Trends, a lot. Like the system, Dr. Sun was bringing up Guahao system, and also all the system of the problem is in the pharmaceutical company and also the doctor relationship. So this actually is a big change. I introduced a little bit myself. I got my, as I said, got my MD in China, worked in China for 5 years, and then I got my PhD in molecular biology in the US. Then I finished my clinical training fellowship at Cornell Medical College. Finished my fellowship last year. But right after finishing my fellowship, I joined a company called Unisource. So that for me, that's a big change. So why I actually made this decision in my career is that I know that everybody know China will be the biggest healthcare market in the world. So come back to the topic, I really want to introduce not only the best technologies, healthcare technologies to China patient, and also like to do my best to introduce a good system, good healthcare system to China, back to China. Actually, last night I've been with several doctors from NGH and also talk about the topics. We think about do something on that. Go back to my company. My company is a transnational company that to connect U.S. health high-tech company to China's market, Lumina market, and also government resources, related industries, and also talent. We have, I know the person is the member of Bear Helix, so we have I think it's Alan Paul from Cornell. Yeah,
So do you have a question?
yeah, sorry. You can already cover some of the topic of question that, in your view, on your view of the company, what's the strategy on your view on China market and what's your main concern when you're doing business or collaborate with a company in China? What's your main concern?
Okay, good question.
Concerns with doing business in China, is to intellectual property, right? And how I'm going to make sure that next year I see my product show up in Vietnam, that kind of thing. So, but I know the government is making a pretty stern stance on that kind of issue, and but I mean, there's a law about how to actually enforce it, make sure it happens, and that's a different story. So I think from my perspective, I have half of my life in China, half of my life in the U.S. That's where I see the biggest challenge for the U.S. company. They're concerned on doing, working with a partner in China, licensing certain technologies in China.
Yeah, I think that there's, I know a couple of groups in Beijing and Shanghai who specialize and really pioneered being the partner in China to help Medtronic and J&J, and then now smaller companies find distribution partners in China. Those partners and that trust, and it's so hard for a U.S. company to navigate. And then once they're locked into a relationship, oftentimes they then discover that really that guy didn't have the distribution footprint that they really claimed, and so they get held up. Even folks that are very good, even Gerald Chan, who just gave the biggest gift to Harvard, has complained to me about one of his diagnostics companies where they did all of the work, both in the U.S. and in China. They got through the SFDA in China. They got that approval, and still they had to give $2 of every $4 to the distribution network. And so he couldn't, after the costs of producing the diagnostic, they couldn't make any money. It was very tough. That is, to your point, changing rapidly now, right? That the very fragmented markets, the very sub-regional markets are changing, but I would say, use the digital technologies to really scale that and circumvent lots of the traditional middlemen and go direct to the consumer. Go on Alibaba when you can. It's tough. Alibaba and Alipay's lawyers have been very tough with a company that I've been involved in because they're very careful for healthcare, and they have a very specific list of services and products that they will not allow you to post on that marketplace. But if you can get through those lawyers, obviously it's a huge win.
Just like this website matched the taxi service with patient, I forgot, Uber, right? So, and I think maybe use something like that to address some of the distribution challenges. Take the human factors out, match your customer with, match your demand with supply, basically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Uberify everything. We've got three groups in my healthcare ventures class taking on Uber for healthcare, for aging population, for home nursing, for primary care physicians, things like that. The biggest challenge is how do you differentiate, continue to differentiate, or how do you get the network effects that other people can't get? In healthcare, that's really hard because it is such a regional delivery of that healthcare.
So just to continue discussing about market, so as a healthcare professional, everybody knows that China has a huge market for healthcare technologies. So I think you guys just talk briefly about further established biopharma companies. So how about the early stage biotechnologies? So what do you guys think are the major challenges of transferring the early stage biotechnology from the States to China? Because you can take both the advantage of the technology advantage from the States and the capital advantage from China. So what do you think are the major challenges?
I think one of them, and please jump in, but one of them is, will they work in China? Will they work because, for instance, if you've got Tarceva is well known to work better actually in Chinese cancer patients than in European and Caucasian cancer patients. It's just different genomics and different racial profile actually improves or makes it harder to have the same efficacy. And so what that says is everyone needs to have a leg of their research in China for a particular molecule, right? And smaller biotechs, even mid-sized biotechs, can't afford to do that yet unless there's a creative partnership to do that. Big Pharma is already there and doing it, right? J&J has gone from 2% of worldwide patients in clinical trials in Chinese population to now north of 10%, and they're going higher. And they've built out, and in fact, a Boston clinician, Dayao Zhao, who came from Beida, but went back, is heading up R&D and has really streamlined all of that in partnership with the Chinese medical associations too. So I think there needs to be more of that. There will absolutely be more of that. It's just how to bridge that, and where do you start? Do you start here? Do you take it over with a clinical research organization in China? There's more of those than ever now, and that actually can do things to a standard that the U.S. FDA trusts. So I think that's coming.
There's a great company from China called Wuxi Pharma. They do a great job. You pretty much have a great idea here. You do a virtual company and have them do all the work, and they're doing better than you will be able to do, because they've been doing this for years. So I mean, that's one model.
That's actually almost becoming the model for early stage U.S. companies to do a lot of what kind of characterization of molecules here. The IP it starts in the U.S. and goes worldwide, but the actual kind of development of the compounds, and I'm talking very early stage, is done with a Chinese CRO. I think what is interesting, and I think maybe where your question was driving to a little bit on the therapeutic side is, when are we going to see kind of the China innovation where they're innovating molecules, perhaps on the early stage, right, and then bringing it worldwide, right? And I don't see a lot of that yet, but I think that it likely will evolve because of these CROs who are becoming very sophisticated. That's a great example. Wuxi is a great example. I think they are actually doing some innovation themselves, and we'll probably see that. Of course, the time frame from these things are 20 years, and so it's they could have a really promising new stuff. Yeah.
Kind of like unrealistic for the venture capitals to actually invest money. Because from the China venture capital firm, they basically are seeking for return for like
Yeah.
3 or 5 years. So that's
Shorter.
like
Well, on the
so
therapeutic
long
side,
compared
yeah,
to-
but that's true of all therapeutic life sciences, right?
Right.
And I think it goes back to, and weighing here because, I think folks here on the panel and the audience have more experience on that kind of investment in China, but that kind of quorum of companies or the range of entrepreneurs you need to build that up. So in Boston, we talked about how there are physicians, there are VCs, there are investors, and there are other companies just like that. And I think once you start boiling that up, and perhaps it'll start with some of these CROs in China, perhaps you'll see that kind of direct investment, I speculate.
I
Yeah.
think George just talked about the
Yeah.
ecosystem here in
Yeah.
Boston. I
Right.
think, you got the Harvard, MIT, other schools you're coming from. And then you have the top 5 NIH-funded hospitals here, all the Harvard-affiliated hospitals here. So all this stuff plays together, and that's why you have this cluster, super cluster they call it here. But then, you look at China, and I think Shanghai is probably Zhangjiang, that area, it may be a potential place for that, but I don't think they're quite there yet. But, WuXi is making a huge difference, and so is BGI, right? So, some of you know Huadaji. So they're used to do work for Broad Institute, anywhere else that need a sequencing, they do it for you.
Right.
They learn through that process how to do it right. Now they have prenatal tests that they're marketing in China. It's great because
That's a great example.
there's
that's
a lot of
great.
Chinese women
Yeah,
that are
right.
not getting their kids until a later age. So here they're screening everyone
Yeah.
for Down syndrome.
Yep.
Yep.
I'm working for a life science consulting company, and we do a lot of physician surveys and interviews, and to evaluate a kind of technology or new drug. So we realized that the physicians' input is very, very important to address the unmet need. So my question are how do you interact with those physicians, the doctors, and how much time you spend in a hospital? So on the opposite side, so their opinions are very hard to identify the unmet need because it's not very structured. So sometimes you need a lot of engineers the speakers to identify or structure the unmet need. So how do you think about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges in our class with U.S. doctors as well, is doctors will tell you how it is and the challenges in their clinical practice. Until you put something in front of them and describe a different experience or describe a tool, it's hard to get feedback from them. And so really you have to come up with envisioning that different tool or that different experience, and then if the doctor's the critical decider, you got to go see how the doctors feel and how they're compensated, if it's going to save them time, if it's going to make them more money. But if it's not, you can circumvent them and go directly to the patient and talk about the patient pain or faster recovery or things like that, and have the patients drive some of that. And just like in the U.S., where patients get direct-to-consumer advertising and go to their doctor and ask for certain things, that's happening more and more in China too. And I think that's an inevitability, even though there are more restrictions against consumer advertising in China. But information will flow around that, I think.
It's helpful to build a prototype, but that prototype could be Post-it notes and stop-action video, or crayons and butcher paper, or simple things you could find in a kitchen, right? And because you can have a conversation with someone about the concept, and as mentioned, you have to have something in your hand to kind of play with it and touch it, or push the buttons, even if they're simulated buttons, to get an idea of what the thing is, and then you can have that conversation.
Yeah, I actually give you a real-world example. A company that just finished a Dream It Health cycle in Philadelphia a couple weeks ago were our two biomedical engineers from Hopkins that had come up with a new way of quantifying, they're focused on wound care. And, this was, doctors knew inherently there was, an issue. The state of the art is measuring physically with a ruler the size and, trying to characterize a wound. And this company developed essentially a smartphone app that would, you take a picture of the wound, it would quantify to a 99%, degree of reliability and precision, but it wasn't enough to just fix that part. The entire the company was really focused on creating a platform that enabled doctors to be able to be reimbursed for reviewing. They're talking to EHR providers about having to integrate and get that data back into the system. And so even though they're solving a very specific problem, it's integrating that into the healthcare system that's going to be the biggest challenge. And it was really a problem that wasn't perceived to exist until, they actually, spent time, embedded essentially with doctors in the day-to-day. So it's a big challenge. It's true for any industry, but healthcare, I think, in particular. It's when you try to force somebody to change their behavior, you're already, going uphill. So, especially in healthcare.
Yeah. All right, good question. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think I have a very similar question with him, and I think you guys already answered everything I want to ask. But I think I'm wondering whether you can just tell more about some story based on your experience or knowledge about how those clinical needs have been identified. For example, I'm a student from Harvard. I'm taking class at Harvard Medical School. I'm from the Center of Renaissance. I got an opportunity to talk with a physician, and I realized there's a big opportunities for the wearable defibrillator. But I think those opportunities very rare. I don't know. Next matter whether I also have some opportunities to talk with those physicians. So, as a student or as a new entrepreneur, what do you think, or do you have some suggestions for us to know those kind of clinical need? Yeah.
I think we wrestle with that because we don't have our medical school here at MIT, and so we're always going over to the hospitals, and not just to the doctors, but to the nurses, and saying, what are the problems? What do you need? But one of the biggest sources of kind of powerful needs are really the patients, right? Where are their terrible experiences? And it turns into a bitch fest oftentimes, right? But you get those ideas, and then you figure out, what has a technical solution that can scale, because I think that's what a venture-backed company is good, needs, is something that is really scalable, so digital, and has a really strong business model, right? And in China, you have more freedom for different business models because there's more direct-to-consumer. It's more out-of-pocket payments, and I think that you can, for the first time, go around the hospitals in a lot of ways.
I would emphasize that. I think that's, in the U.S. anyway, in healthcare, most of the time your user is not your customer, right? The definition of a customer is someone who pays you, but oftentimes it's a user, or it's the doctor or the patient. So even if you have built a better mousetrap, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get somebody to pay for it. That direct-to-consumer model is certainly a clearer path, and maybe a huge advantage to doing business in China.
And if you check our Hacking Medicine website, we've got a bunch of worksheets, and one of them is the one-page business model. And it works through exactly who's the payer, how do you activate the customer, how do you get distribution, and all the essential elements of your business plan right there on one page.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Hi, my name is Ko Ching. I'm from School of Public Health at Harvard. And I study genomic data analysis and also electronic medical record data. And so I'm thinking about starting a company in personalized medicine in China. But I'm worried for two reasons. One is a timing issue, because in the United States, even in the United States, people still haven't figured out the model to how to do this, because payers don't want to pay for it, and the public are very worried about the data, the validity of the data, and the regulation is very strict. And so I was thinking about, even in the United States, so tough. Should I wait for a few years before I go back to China and start there? Because I kind of like half started there, but it's just so tough. So I was thinking about, well, should I wait or should I just start it now? And when the tides come, I can catch the tide. This is the first timing issue. The second issue, actually, someone mentioned the BGI. So, in China, we have already, huge player, basically the driver of the industry. Now they are like try to commoditize the whole industry by, making their own machines, even making their own like reagent to lower the cost, and also the labor cost is so cheap. So in that environment, if I go back to China, should I collaborate with them, or should I find some strategy to somehow to compete with them? What do you think? What kind of my strategy should be if I go to China? Thank you.
I didn't remember the first one.
The timing.
Yeah. My advice is always, when you want to do something, gotta do it, okay? And you can't sit there thinking, worry about this, worry about that, and time will pass. Someone will come up with something even better than your thought. If you're really innovative, and just push yourself. Start it as soon as possible. Get the lawyer help you to protect your IP. That's
Thank you.
important. That's important. But you could see, I have many lawyer friends in the States, Chinese or American. So the other thing, it was the second
The
question.
BGI competition.
Yeah, I mean, that depends on what you're doing. You can work with them if they help. You might be your partner, strategic partner, and someday they may acquire your technology. Talk with them, without disclose too much again, and make sure and that's something they want to work with you, and you could leverage on certain things they are good at it. This is not everything you could do everything yourself. You're just a startup company. Certain thing you got to partner with other people. If they're good, you're bad on that particular area. You got to work with someone.
Yeah, that's,
I was just going to completely agree with Jen. And, as to the competition, personalized medicine is, huge, right? It's billions of different things, right? Because we're all different, right? And so, on certain specific aspects of that, there are many. Certainly I could envision that you could kind of own that, regardless of a bigger player like some of the competitors. So I would say do it.
The timing you think is right to do.
Well, right. It depends on
There's
what it
never
is,
a right
though, right?
time.
Yeah,
There's
what
a
is
never
it?
a right time.
The flip of that is personalized medicine is still in its infancy,
Exactly.
right? But if you have a specific idea that you think could grow and evolve with the technology, then the timing is right.
And in general, it'll always take longer and cost more than you estimate. So again, the faster you get onto that learning curve, the better.
Right.
I think we often say, are we a year too late or are we 10 years too early?
Yeah.
And you're debating both sides of that,
Right.
right? And it's very hard to know. I think the challenge in an early stage company from where I think you're standing is, who do you raise that first money from? And you have a real obligation to those investors. And how are you really better go in with an idea of how you're going to differentiate yourself. And you should, to the prior points, you're never going to get the economies of scale that BGI has, right? Or at least it's going to be many years till you can do that yourself. So you're going to have to either work with them as a partner or work with another group. KindStar is also doing sequencing in China, right? There are other folks that have that same infrastructure. So you'll be able to figure that out. Or work back here with the Broad while you're here right? And bring the brand and the trust of a U.S. company. Foundation Medicine is getting samples from China themselves, and they're based here in Boston.
And kind of back to what we talked about very originally was that, when you start a company, it's sometimes advantageous, and others can weigh in with, to investors to have a kind of more specific idea that you take forward in the kind of shorter term, define that however your company defines short term, and then have this platform which could evolve to something substantially different or bigger or different. So you have kind of two bites, if you will.
I think she mentioned earlier, you need to be flexible in
Yep.
a way, because you're not stuck in one idea and it failed, that nothing else happens. An investor I think investors looking at yourself first. And there's so many examples of some of these investment they made it on people. Their first project might not work, but investor like the person, they know they can do great things, and they will work with them. They will coach, they will mentor them to lead you toward your success, because they know you got the key attributes in yourself that can make that happen. So they invest on you, then invest on your technology.
I will second that. Our selection criteria, we select companies for an accelerator top 3 or team, and team. That's what we're focused on. It's the talent. It's the people. I mean, technologies, market, yeah, it all has to be there, but it's really the team that's going to take it forward.
Yeah, and so to that point, I'm actually creating a new foundry to create new digital health companies, and one of the themes is China consumer healthcare. And we've already got partnerships based back in China with funders as well as distribution. So I'd be happy to talk with anyone who is interested in kind of that theme and early stage. And I have open office hours here at MIT, but we bring in lots of folks from Harvard as well. So and other universities around town.
Are there other universities?
We're open to all the students in the Boston area who want to affect that. So happy to help. Okay, so let's take our last question. We're close to the witching hour, so.
My name is Yin Shan. I am an MBA student in the healthcare track from Yale. My question is kind of a local question. In early October this year, the healthcare insurance company in Massachusetts are required to post the healthcare service, the price of the healthcare service public. And I'm trying to understand this law enforcement, how it will affect the healthcare technology company. So would that be a good news for the entrepreneurs? I mean, how the medical device company, are there any comms and posts to the medical device company, and how they will cope with the strategies?
So let me see if I get that right. So you're saying that they will post very transparently what all the prices are. Now, to my knowledge, most of the public hospitals, all of the public hospitals have had to do that for most things so far, even for the last few years.
It's required to the healthcare insurance company.
Okay.
There's a CPT code on a lot of the tests, and in the government agencies called CMS, Center of Medicare Services, and they set the low limit. In this country, they set the national low limit. And I guess the idea is to make sure that if we're both doing business, we're not cutting each other to the point where the quality goes nowhere, right? So yeah, that helps basically set the price line for all the business, because you will see people a little bit up and down a little bit from that, and that's how in the diagnostic world works, and a lot of medical practices is like that.
I agree with that, but there's another understanding about this. It's going toward the market, so they public the price from the insurance company, and now it's a tax in Massachusetts. Yeah. And it might be a trend in the future. It will promote to the whole country, like insurance, and that's what I am trying to understand, what this will affect the healthcare technology, the companies, and how they are going to cope with it.
Well, there's you can look at parallels in other industries. For example, that same organization, CMS, classified a certain set of medical devices as durable medical equipment. And I'm familiar, for example, in the glucose testing industry, where there's been a fairly open bidding process for the price of test strips. And that's had a pretty interesting transformative effect on that industry. There's more effort in cost than there ever has been. It's also a little bit destructive to some of the companies that are in that industry because they were used to fairly high margins, and those margins are now eroding. I think that's sort of the natural cycle of the way of the world. You know, it's kind of okay. So although, you know, maybe it's a little disruptive, it's probably a good thing for costs to float down or be driven down to their natural levels, because then that'll eventually drive some of the weaker players out of the market, and it'll create more innovation opportunities for people that can compete on those terms.
I think just the, you know, our movement towards consumer-directed healthcare in general, which, you know, obviously is already the Chinese healthcare market, sounds like, is going to, as we create more educated consumers of healthcare, that's only a positive in terms of driving out costs as well as improving quality, ultimately.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for your attention and giving your time to this, and good questions.
All right.
And thank you to the panelists,
Yeah.
and thank you to Serena.
Yeah, thank you for the speakers and the participation from our audiences.